What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so we are like 2.5 weeks, if that. We're like a week and a half out from the release of Thor Ragnarok, and I'm actually really excited because I have been sitting here trying to think of who it is that's going to die in Thor 3. Now, one of the reasons why I'm also doing this kind of early is because we have a lot of Thor stuff to cover. We have like the death of Odin, Ragnarok. Those of you guys who don't know, and this is actually a really cool little tidbit, when it comes to Marvel Comics, there's the Ultimate Universe and the main Marvel Universe. The main Marvel Universe is what you think of when you think of like Captain America, Spider-Man, so on and so forth. The Ultimate Universe is cool, and it had some cool moments, but for the most part, the main Marvel Universe is what people consider. In the mid-1990s, Marvel launched a story where they were trying to reinvigorate interest in comic books due to the huge comic bust and the fact that Marvel almost went bankrupt, and they launched a story called Heroes Reborn. Heroes Reborn was okay. I mean, it was interesting enough, but it only lasted for about a year. After that, everything was restored, and then basically a guy named Dan Jurgens took over the stories of Thor. Dan Jurgens got his claim to fame because he was the guy who wrote the death of Superman, or at least the biggest contributor to the death of Superman, and then the aftermath, the reign of the Superman. But the idea was that Dan Jurgens writing Thor lasted from 1998, I think it was, all the way up until like 2005, 2006, somewhere along those lines, when he basically crafted all the events that led to Ragnarok, to the quote-unquote death of Thor. And it was super cool because we got things like Across All Worlds, Thor versus Thanos, which is like this 8-issue epic. It's actually pretty cool. We got like the death of Odin and different things like that. But I've been sitting here trying to figure out who it is that's gonna die in the events of Thor Ragnarok. And as far as I'm concerned, there's only like a handful of characters who will probably die. The first question we have to ask here is, what direction is Thor Ragnarok going to take? I haven't read anything about it. I'm totally trying to avoid spoilers if at all possible, but I feel like the Thor Ragnarok movie is going to basically be a combination of the Ragnarok event from the main Marvel comics and the origin of Thor from the Ultimate Universe. So let's take each of these in stride. Let's go ahead and run over each of these. So we've already covered the origin of Ultimate Thor. You'll find that down in the description. Actually, you'll find the Thor playlist down in the description where you can catch all kinds of cool stuff. Ultimate Thor was originally designed to be this character where you didn't really know if he was a god or not. Now, this lasted until 2011, I think, 2012, something like that, when Marvel launched a story called Ultimate Thor, and it was basically his origin story. And what we ended up learning was that, much like the main Marvel Universe Ragnarok event, that Loki had led an invasion of Asgard. The difference is this: in the main Marvel Universe, Ragnarok unfolded where Thor basically ran around Earth and started waking up all the Asgardians after they died. In the Ultimate Universe, that didn't happen. Instead, Odin knew that Ragnarok was coming, that Asgard was going to fall. And so what he did is he basically took everything that comprises Asgard and threw it inside the hammer of Thor, inside Mjolnir, so that Asgard would live on forever. Now, Thor's character basically regained his godhood and then lost it and so on and so forth. He was reborn on Earth as just this guy. The whole idea behind it was that Loki had led an invasion of Asgard, Asgard had fallen, and then Thor was never able to make his way back again. In the main Marvel Universe, it played out differently. In the main Marvel Universe, Ragnarok happened due to a couple things. The first was the death of Odin at the hands of Surtur. The second was that by virtue of Odin being killed, it left this sort of power vacuum that Thor tried to fill when he basically became the new ruler of Asgard, but he wasn't as powerful as his father was. The kicker about all this is that there was something called the Odin Force, and the Odin Force is like this enigmatic plot device. It's basically just what Marvel uses to say that Odin's as powerful as he is. In truth, the Odin Force is actually a combination of the life forces of Odin's two brothers, Vili and V, combined with his own. And the way this originally happened is, I believe, they challenged Surtur the first time they ever fought, and Surtur ended up killing Vili and V. Their souls merged with Odin, which basically granted him all these new powers and abilities, and then he in turn fought Surtur and then confined him to the core of the earth, something along those lines. The idea was that during the death of Odin's storyline, Surtur was basically awakened and freed from his prison. Fast forward to the events of Ragnarok, Loki allied himself with Surtur and then made new hammers, and then used those hammers to basically invade Asgard, kill all the Asgardians, and then Thor went on this great big huge vision quest where he followed all these paths that Odin did in order to see what was coming later on down the line, and learned about the ones who sit above in shadow, and all this crazy stuff that was going on that we'll cover once we cover the Thor Ragnarok story. But the long and short of it is that when Asgard fell and Thor was believed to have been dead, his hammer crashed through Earth, right? Like it flew through hell, I think it was, and then crashed through Earth, freed Dr. Doom in the process. And then eventually the hammer was picked up, it was brought back to Thor, Thor returned back to the realm of the living, and then went on this quest to begin waking up all these Asgardians who had been basically reborn, but confined in mortal forms. Now from there, it turned into crazy stuff. Loki was reborn as a chick, and then you end up finding out that the body was meant for Sif, but Loki stole it. And so like Loki was a woman for a while. But the fact remains that the whole idea was that it was basically this death and rebirth of Asgard, that it's been happening for untold millennia, for countless eons and eons, that Asgard always falls by the events of Ragnarok, and Asgard is always reborn when Thor brings it back. And so again, I think that the movie is going to be a combination of those two things. I think what it's going to do is it's going to see Asgard fall in its entirety. I think all the Asgardians are going to die, just like they did in the main Marvel universe and in the Ultimate Universe. The difference is I think we're going to get the Ultimate Universe version where Thor is going to be the only survivor. I think that Loki is going to die. The problem with this is that if I remember correctly, Loki is supposed to be in Infinity War. So it may be that Loki doesn't die. And that's kind of the weird thing about this, is because in the film, it looks like Hela, the daughter of Loki, is the one who invades Asgard in the first place and brings Asgard crashing down, which begs the question, does that throw everything into flux? Because if it was always Loki who basically brought down Asgard and who led to the fall of Asgard, but now it's Hela in the movie, does that mean Loki's going to be just one of the guys who tries to live, who tries to survive? We don't have an answer to that question. I do not think that Thor is going to die in Ragnarok. I think Thor is going to live. I think that Odin will die, and I think that in response to Odin dying, that Thor will basically inherit the Odin Force, which will become the Thor Force. And the reason why I say that is because right now in the MCU, if Thor were to race off and try to fight against Thanos, he would get wrecked. I mean, it wouldn't even be funny. Thanos without the Infinity Stones would just wreck Thor. I mean, we've seen it countless times. We saw it during the events of Infinity. We saw it during the events of Thor versus Thanos. We saw it in like all these different stories, you know, where all this stuff happened. It was crazy in terms of how it unfolded. But if Thor inherits the Odin Force, then that means that he's now more powerful than he's ever been. In the comics, he inherited the Odin Force and became like Rune King Thor, where he was basically just like this godly multiversal entity for like 2 pages. It was crazy how powerful he was, but it would allow him to basically have the power to rebuild Asgard. He would basically be able to bring it all back. And so I think that what he'll do is I think we'll see Odin dying either at the hands of Surtur, or we'll see Odin dying during the events of Ragnarok, and then we'll see Thor absorbing the Odin Force. Now that begs the question, what about the other Asgardians? Heimdall, Sif, and all the other members of the Warriors 3, and you know, Balder the Brave. I don't think we've seen Balder the Brave in Thor yet. For those of you guys who don't know, Thor is not the actual son of Odin. He's the son of Odin and the son of Gaia, the spirit of Earth. Balder the Brave is the son of Odin and Frigga. He's the only real tried and true biological son of Odin. But in the comics, Balder was hidden away because it was believed that if Balder died, it would be the first stage to initiate Ragnarok. And so we have no idea where he is. It could be that we're introduced to him and then he dies within half an hour in the movie. I have no idea. Regardless, I think we'll see basically Loki and Thor as the only survivors of Asgard. I think everybody else is going to fall. I think everybody else is going to die. And I think it's going to leave Asgard as just like this vacant husk, this shell of what used to be this huge Asgardian pantheon. Now, I think what that'll do is it'll segue into Infinity War, that Thor will basically show up with the Odin Force intact. And I think the reason why Marvel will do that is because of how impactful it is. You know, when it comes to Odin and the Odin Force, he's crazy powerful. We've never seen the extent of it, but in the MCU, it's basically established that Odin is one of the most powerful beings in existence. It's just one of those things that we've just kind of been informed of subtly and that we kind of accept. If Thor shows up with the power of his father and then gets wrecked by Thanos with the Infinity Stones, then people are just going to be like, Jesus, man, this guy's powerful. Following that, I think that, you know, going after the events of Infinity War, I think that Thor will rebuild Asgard and Asgard will basically come back. I think it'll allow Marvel to kind of do a reboot, so to speak, when it comes to the character of Thor, when it comes to Asgard itself, or whatever the case may be, because Anthony Hopkins is not going to play Odin forever. I have no idea. You know, it may just be that we never see Asgard again. It may just be that Thor just kind of takes off and that's the end of him. You know, it may be that we end up seeing things like the introduction of Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill was the first character to lift the hammer of Thor. It was a huge deal. It was during Walt Simonson's run, and it's just like this Corbinite just shows up, you know, leading the ship of his own people who are trying to escape their planet. Thor shows up. Beta Ray Bill's like, I'm a protector. He fights Thor, takes his hammer, and becomes Thor. It's super cool. Like, it's one of those really interesting stories. But again, that's my theory. I think that in Thor Ragnarok, we will see the death of all the Asgardians wins, except for Loki and except for Thor. But again, I haven't really looked at the casting of Infinity War, and there's nothing to say these characters can die and then just will be brought back later on down the line. I mean, that's entirely possible. You know, we don't really know. But when it comes to the MCU, Marvel plays it really close to the vest. They keep it grounded in terms of how it all functions. They engage in magic and mysticism only just enough to make sure that we know that it's still fantasy, but also keeping it relatively realistic. If they didn't, if they were just like, hey, we're gonna take the comic book adaptation of magic and throw it into the movies, Doctor Strange would be godly powerful. It'd be crazy how powerful he is in terms of all the stuff that he could do. He would be like, you know what? This problem is solved by a wave of my hand and an incantation, and suddenly everything's fixed. It'd be it'd be bananas to see it happen. But let me know down in the comments section, because I'm kind of curious, who do you guys think will die? Do you guys think Thor will die? Do you think Loki will die? I am personally hyped to see Surtur. I am so hyped to see Surtur. This guy is just stupid OP. It's crazy like how overpowered he is. I'm really excited to see it. I think it's gonna be pretty amazing. But anyway, guys, I figured I'd throw this little bit of a speculation video out there. Let me know who you think will end up perishing, who will go the way of the dodo in Thor Ragnarok. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.